The call came on a Tuesday morning in late October, while I was sitting at the kitchen table with my second coffee going cold beside me. Mr. Hargrove. It was Margaret Ellison, my wife's lawyer, the one Beverly had hired separately years ago without telling me. I'd met her once at a dinner party and never thought much of it. I need you to come to my office today. There's something in the estate file I should have flagged sooner. I'm sorry I should have called you months ago. I asked her what it was about. She paused just long enough to make my stomach drop. Your wife left a sealed letter in her personal file. She asked me to wait 18 months after her passing before contacting you. That period ended last week. Beverly had been gone for a year and a half. She died of pancreatic cancer on a Thursday afternoon in April with the maple outside her hospital window just coming into bud. I'd held her hand until it went still, and I hadn't slept properly since. I put down my coffee cup and said I'd be there by 11. The drive to Margaret Ellison's office in downtown Kingston took me past the turnoff to our old house, the one Beverly and I had bought when we were 32, raised 2 kids in, renovated twice, and where I still lived. I took the long way without thinking about it. I wasn't ready to think too hard about anything yet. Beverly had planned things. That was always her way. She planned our retirement, planned the garden beds 3 seasons out, planned Christmas in September. When she was diagnosed, she'd sat across from me at that same kitchen table and said, very calmly, I need you to let me handle some things. I had let her. It was one of the kindest things I ever did, and I didn't know it at the time. Margaret Ellison met me in the reception area herself. She was a small woman in her 60s, silver-haired, with reading glasses on a chain. She shook my hand and led me to a corner office that looked out over the river. There was a white envelope on the desk, sealed with tape, Beverly's handwriting on the front. Just my name. Arthur. She gave me specific instructions, Margaret said. She wanted you to read it here, in case you had questions I could answer. But she also said you might need a few minutes alone. I said I'd read it alone. Margaret stepped out and closed the door. I sat there for a full minute before I touched the envelope. Beverly's handwriting looked the same as it always had. The looping capital A. The careful way she crossed her T's. She'd written grocery lists in that handwriting. Birthday cards. A note she once left on my pillow that I still kept in my sock drawer. I opened the letter. It was 4 pages, handwritten, dated 8 months before she died, before she'd even told me about the diagnosis. She'd known longer than she let on. That was the first thing that hit me, that she'd been sitting with us alone for weeks while I was still thinking we had decades left. The second thing was what she wrote about our son-in-law. Arthur, I need you to know something I should have said out loud years ago, and I'm sorry it took me this long. I'm saying it now because I won't be there to say it later, and because I love you too much to leave without saying it. I don't trust Brendan. I know how that sounds. I know you see how well he does for himself, and how he takes care of the yard, and how he makes Stephanie laugh. And I know you want to believe that's enough. But I've watched him for 11 years, and there are things I've seen that don't add up. She went on for 2 full pages. She described finding bank documents in Stephanie's maiden name that Brendan had apparently asked her to sign without explaining them. She wrote about a conversation she'd overheard at our cottage 3 summers ago, when Brendan had been on the phone in the boathouse. She hadn't caught all of it, but enough. Something about equity and timing. Something about equity and timing. Something about waiting until the old man isn't watching. She wrote about the way he talked about money when he thought Beverly wasn't listening. The way he'd steered our daughter away from her own friends over the years, little by little, until Stephanie's whole world was Brendan's world. I don't know exactly what he's planning. I don't know if Stephanie knows. But I know you, Arthur, and I know that when I'm gone, you will grieve and you will be tired and you will want to say yes to things just to feel like you're still part of a family. Don't say yes to things without thinking first. Talk to Margaret. Change the will to a trust if you haven't already. And please, please be careful. The last page was different. Softer. She wrote about the morning we drove up to Algonquin Park on our anniversary and got caught in the rain and ate sandwiches in the car, and she said it was the best day of her life. She wrote that she wasn't sorry for any of it, not one day of it, and that she was grateful I'd let her handle things. She signed it, "All my love, always, Bev." I sat in that office for 20 minutes before I called Margaret back in. I had questions. Margaret told me Beverly had come to see her twice in the months before she told me she was sick. She'd already restructured her portion of our shared assets into a trust with conditions. She'd done it quietly, legally, and without Brendan knowing. Margaret had been waiting as instructed to tell me any of it. "Your wife was a very methodical woman," Margaret said, and for a second I couldn't speak. I drove home slowly. The fall colors were past their peak, the maples gone brown at the edges. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a while, looking at the house. The lights were on in the basement apartment. Brendan's truck was parked at the side. They'd moved in 14 months ago, not long after Beverly was diagnosed. It had been Stephanie's idea, or she'd told me it was her idea. She'd said it would be easier, that they could help, that it was the right thing to do. The house had plenty of space. We'd converted the basement years ago, thinking we'd rent it out, never did. It had its own entrance, its own kitchen, a full bath. I'd said yes because saying yes felt like being a good father. I'd been saying yes to a lot of things. In the months since Beverly died, I'd signed a form that Brendan had brought me. Something to do with a shared investment account he said would simplify things for tax purposes. I'd lent Stephanie $17,000 to cover what she said was a shortfall on their renovation loan. Money she said they'd pay back when the rates came down. I'd agreed to Brendan's suggestion that we update the deed on the cottage to include both our names, though we hadn't gotten to the paperwork yet. I'd done it all because I was tired and lonely, and they were right there, and it felt like family. I thought about all of that while I sat in the driveway. Then I went inside and made dinner and said nothing. The next morning I called Margaret Ellison before 8. I told her I wanted to start over. The will, the accounts, everything. She said she'd been expecting that call. We met twice that week. I also called a financial planner I'd known for years, a woman named June Kowalski, who'd helped Beverly and me set up our RRSPs back in the 90s, and who I trusted completely. June didn't say much when I explained the situation. She asked me to bring in every document I'd signed in the past 2 years. When I laid them all out on her desk, she was quiet for a long moment. The investment account form Brendan had given me was real but misdirected. It linked my assets to an account structure that would allow a joint holder to move funds with minimal oversight. I hadn't been named as joint holder. Brendan hadn't named himself either, not directly, but the numbered company listed as the secondary account holder traced back through 2 intermediaries to a holding company registered in Brendan's mother's name. June had seen it before. Not often, but before. "He's been patient," she said. The cottage deed amendment hadn't been filed yet. That was something, at least. The $17,000 was gone, and I didn't expect to see it again. I asked June what I needed to do. She told me. It took 3 weeks, 2 lawyers, and 1 very uncomfortable afternoon with my bank, but by the time November turned cold, my accounts were restructured, the investment form had been revoked, and a new will was drawn up with a testamentary trust that June and Margaret would co-administer. The cottage stayed in my name alone. I didn't say anything to Stephanie or Brendan. I went about my days the same as before. Made coffee. Shoveled the front walk when the first snow came. Watched the hockey game on Thursdays. Brendan came upstairs to watch with me sometimes. We talked about the Senators. I handed him a beer and listened to him talk and thought about my wife writing 4 pages by hand to protect me from this man. One Friday evening in December, I asked Stephanie if she wanted to have coffee with me on Saturday morning. Just the 2 of us. She looked surprised. We hadn't done that in a while. She came upstairs at 9. Brendan had gone to play hockey. I made her a proper breakfast. Eggs, toast, the good coffee Beverly always kept in the freezer. I found another bag of it in the back of the cupboard months ago and saved it without knowing why. I used it that morning. We talked for a while about nothing. Her job at the school board. whether she was thinking about going back for her master's. Then I put my cup down and I said gently that I wanted to talk to her about something that might be hard to hear. I didn't tell her about Beverly's letter. I wasn't ready for that, and I wasn't sure she was either. But I told her what I'd found when I went through the finances. I showed her what June had explained to me about the account structure. I watched my daughter's face while she looked at the documents. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He told me it was to protect you, or when you couldn't manage things yourself." I said I was 64 years old and I could manage things fine. She looked out the window at the yard, at the bare maple Beverly had planted the year Stephanie was born. She said she needed some time to think. I told her to take all the time she needed. I told her this house would always have room for her, in whatever way she needed that to be true. I meant it. She left before noon. I heard her downstairs for a while, then the side door, then Brendan's truck starting up. I stood at the kitchen window and watched them back out of the driveway without looking up. I won't tell you it was a clean ending. It wasn't. The weeks that followed were difficult. Stephanie called 3 times in January, twice just to talk, once to tell me she'd spoken to a lawyer of her own. She didn't offer details and I didn't ask. Brendan did not call at all. By February, they'd moved out, back to the house they owned in Barhaven, and I came downstairs one afternoon to find the basement apartment empty and very clean, which surprised me, and then didn't. I spent March the way Beverly would have wanted me to. I called a realtor, not to sell the house, just to understand what it was worth, and then I called Margaret Ellison and June Kowalski, and we established the Beverly Hargrove Memorial Bursary at Queen's University, open to mature students returning to school after caregiving. It was June's idea, and I said yes before she'd finished the sentence. We seeded it with a portion of the investment accounts that had been freed up when I restructured everything. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to matter. I repainted the basement in April, cream-colored walls, good lighting. I bought a second-hand armchair and put it near the window and set up my old drafting table there. I'd trained as a civil engineer 40 years ago, and I'd always meant to get back to drawing just for myself, just for the pleasure of it. I started that spring. Stephanie and I talk now. It's careful still, the way things are after they've been broken and mended. You can feel the line where the break was. But it's real. She came for Easter dinner, alone, and we ate Beverly's lemon chicken recipe that I'd had to call my sister-in-law twice to get right. Stephanie brought tulips, the yellow ones Beverly liked. She put them in the old blue pitcher on the counter without being asked, because she remembered where it was. After dinner, we sat in the living room with the lights low, and she told me she'd known something was wrong for a while. Not everything, not the account structure, not what Brendan had been planning, but a feeling, she said, a kind of low-grade unease she'd been explaining away for years. I told her that her mother had known too. She asked me how, and I told her about the letter. She didn't speak for a full minute. Then she said, "That's so, Mum." It was exactly so, Mum. I have the letter in my desk drawer now, the same drawer where I keep the note from Beverly's pillow. Some evenings I take them both out and I read them, or pages of careful handwriting that crossed 18 months of time to find me right when I needed it. A woman who planned 3 seasons ahead, who grew up and loved hard and paid attention, who saw what I didn't see and waited patiently for the right moment to tell me. I think about that, the patience of it. The love required to plan that far out for someone else's protection. The maple in the backyard came back fully this spring. Big canopy, good shade. I had the drafting table moved near the basement window where I can see it while I work. Some mornings when the light comes in just right, I put my pencil down and just watch it for a while. It's enough. It's more than enough. I keep thinking about the timing of things, not in any mystical sense, just the plain, observable fact that the choices people make tend to catch up with them, one way or another, and usually sooner than they expect. Brendan was patient. I'll give him that. He spent years building something, a position, a relationship, a slow and careful proximity to what Beverly and I had worked 4 decades to put together. He was courteous at dinners. He fixed the irresistibles without being asked. He made Stephanie laugh in a way that made it easy to like him, or at least easy not to look too closely. And I didn't look closely. That's on me. But here's what I've come to understand about that kind of patience. When it's pointed in the wrong direction, it doesn't hold. It can't, because the whole structure depends on no one ever asking the right questions, and eventually someone always does. In this case, it was Beverly, 4 pages in her careful handwriting, speaking to me from 18 months in the past. She asked the questions I hadn't thought to ask. She did the looking I hadn't done. That's what I mean when I say honesty takes courage. Not the honesty of saying hard things in the moment, though that matters too, but the honesty of admitting to yourself what you already know and then doing something with it. Beverly knew. She'd known for a while, and instead of softening it, or telling herself she was wrong, or deciding it wasn't her place, she wrote it down. She got the details right. She made sure someone would say it, even after she was gone. I think about what it took to do that. To sit with a diagnosis and a pen and a piece of paper and think clearly about the person you're leaving behind, and to write a warning instead of a comfort. Most of us would have written the comfort. She wrote both, but she wrote the warning first. That's a kind of clear-headedness I find genuinely hard to live up to. And Stephanie? I think about her a lot too. She'd felt something was wrong for years and had spent years explaining it away. I understand that. When you build a life with someone, when the evidence of your choice is woven into your daily routines and your name on a mortgage, and the way you take your coffee, it's hard to hold up a single thread and say, this one isn't right. It takes something real to do that. It takes the willingness to sit at your father's kitchen table and look at documents you didn't want to see and let yourself be uncomfortable enough to act. She did that. It cost her something. I don't think she's finished paying the cost of it, honestly. But she did it. What I try to carry forward from all of this is something pretty simple, though it took me a long time to see it clearly. Paying attention is not optional. Understanding what's actually happening around you, in your accounts, in your relationships, in the slow drift of small decisions, that's not paranoia. That's just responsibility. Beverly understood it. June Kowalski understood it. I had to learn it the harder way, and when something is wrong, when you know it, even quietly, even without being able to fully explain it, saying so is not cruelty. It's the most useful thing you can do. Beverly said so in 4 handwritten pages, delivered 18 months late, and it was enough. It was more than enough. The maple came back fully this spring. I draw it sometimes, in the evenings when the light is good,